coal seam gas industry is under pressure again today with news of a possible contamination of cancer-causing chemicals in Queensland.
A new report has revealed 5 coal seam gas wells in Queensland could have ignited after they developed leaks.
An inquiry is underway into the release of thousands of litres of liquid from a coal seam gas well near Campbelltown.
No one can be sure what came out of that well, and this is the problem with this industry. I mean, it's an absolute joke that the gas companies are allowed to self-report.
Food exports threatened by contaminated water are as vital as mining to Australia.
That whole export market is going to be wiped out, and that's going to be absolutely economically catastrophic.
The whole coal seam gas issue is completely out of control.
All of a sudden, large parts of Australia have exploded in indignation about the activities of mining and gas companies on the hunt for untapped resources.
Thousands of protesters across the country have staged rallies against the coal seam gas industry.
People are not aware of what's happening. It's sort of come through the back door.
In New South Wales, they gathered by the thousands.
They say mining companies in the Illawarra are already drilling in water catchment areas that are closed to the public.
The people's voice is getting louder on this.
I'm starting to see that the people are waking up and seeing behind the shiny veneer of corporate spin.
This coal seam gas industry is like an old car screaming down the highway with bad brakes and no reverse.
A message for miners, banners borne by farmers, families, business owners, all fighting to save the land they love.
This is, to me, the biggest issue facing this country. We are talking about public health. We're talking about the massive diminution of the availability of water. We're talking about the contamination of water, and then, of course, all of this on prime agricultural land across Australia at a time when a former Prime Minister has talked about the importance of food security. If this isn't a major issue facing this country, and if this isn't something that galvanises all Australians, including the media and politicians, then I'm simply saying Australia is in for a hell of a lot of trouble down the track.
A storm is upon us. Our future rests on a knife's edge. We cannot allow the coal seam gas industry to destroy our lives and the country we all love. Coal seam gas mining is without a doubt the most extreme experiment in social and environmental engineering that Australia has ever seen.
Governments in Canberra, Queensland and New South Wales are taking mining companies' money and giving them a licence to do whatever they want.
Of all people in the world, living in a desert continent, we understand the value of water. Of all people in the world, we understand the value in this thin strip of arable farming land, the value of farming land.
Now we're confronted, with wells, with gravel roads, with signs everywhere.
Gas workers are constantly around. Katie says they've lost control of their property. Scott Lloyd works as best as he can around the gas operations. What really worries him is the accelerated drop in his water table since the companies arrived. His cattle are totally dependent on bore water drawn from the Great Artesian Basin. At this one, the level has fallen 10 metres, though the gas companies dispute his findings.
If it continues to decline at the rate we are, we've probably only got 2 to 3 years water left here, so it's pretty scary, yeah.
What's happening under the Lloyd's farm is a highly technical process to extract coal seam gas. To get it, a well has to be drilled between 300 and 1,200 metres through aquifers to coal beds deep underground. The gas is trapped within the seams and held in place by water pressure. To release the gas, first the water has to be pumped to the surface. Then the gas can flow. Sometimes, depending on geology, hydraulic fracturing or fracking of the coal seam is required. What this means is that a mixture of water, sand and chemicals are blasted into the coal beds to crack and hold open the seams, allowing the gas to flow.
Really, it hinges on this issue of fracking. And the science is out because it's a damn mystery, it's too complicated. But I reckon the analogy is like this, taking on a rural analogy. It's like having a sheet of corrugated tin laying in the middle of a paddock on a hot summer's day. And someone says to you, we don't know that there's a poisonous snake underneath that corrugated tin. There could be, and there might not be. What I want you to do is put your hand under the tin and see if there is one. Now, and what's worse, with this particular snake, it's not just you that would die, it's actually you, your kids, your partners, your local community, everybody in the nation would all suffer. Well, who here would put their hand under the tin? No way. No way.
Recently, you may have seen the reports that the fracking in the north of England has been stopped because there have been 50 earthquakes associated with the fracking project. Now, that mightn't be scientific research, but there's bloody good evidence that the earthquakes result from the fracking. But imagine that vast network of unstable coal seams, because they've been essentially fractured, leaching toxicity stuff into our environment for years and years and years. How will they ever remediate it if it goes wrong?
Coal seam gas mining is forecast to use 300 gigalitres a year from the groundwater system. A gigalitre is 1 billion litres. It's equivalent of 500 Olympic swimming pools. 300 gigalitres is 150,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools, and that's extracted by coal seam gas mining every year. Will 300 gigalitres lower water levels in the aquifers? The 300 gigalitres a year would be more than half as much as is presently extracted from the Great Artesian Basin each year. And this is called a conservative estimate. The miners get every bit they want. There is no limit on the amount of water available to miners. There is no limit on the amount of land that they can clear.
When gas wells are drilled, thousands of megalitres of water are released, along with tonnes of salt, none of which can go back into the soil.
We look into history. We stuffed up the Murray-Darling Basin from over allocation. It's costing us hundreds of millions of dollars now to fix. We don't want the same thing to happen to the gas industry. I don't want my kids having to pay the bill for the stuff-ups that happen today.
They will never, ever design a holding pond that will deal with the kind of rainfall events we can get here on the north coast. So at some point, those ponds will fail. They're not going to design them to cope with 600 mil of rainfall in 24 hours, and that's entirely possible for the north coast.
Mining at just one Queensland site would produce 3 million tonnes of salt, enough to raise a pile 10 metres high and 11 kilometres long. And that's 7,000 wells. But there are going to be 40,000 wells in Queensland. Salt water can permanently destroy land. Then there's the introduction of chemicals and other pollutants into the aquifers. Surely if you have a process that carries such risk, there has to be a moratorium until we find out the truth.
Why would they want to put gas wells here? It's ridiculous.
After talking to people affected by coal seam gas mining from the Liverpool Plains to the Darling Downs, I now realise that we confront a threat more profoundly dangerous, more sinister than anything I ever imagined.
This is the greatest threat to our country that I've seen.
This is the biggest single issue that we've seen in this country ever.
Surely we need a comprehensive health assessment of all chemical releases associated with coal seam gas activities. We're talking about people's lives here. And we need to investigate the long-term impacts of the industry in terms of clean-up and remediation of contaminated areas, the treatment of wastewater, groundwater impacts, the increased landfill capacity to dispose of coal seam gas waste products. None of that is known to anyone. Surely it's time for the nation to wake up. It's hard to believe that the beautiful area of Casino in Lismore in New South Wales that produces beef, dairy cattle, sugarcane, nuts and fruit from rich chocolate-coloured soil that you could eat Metgasco have an exploration licence covering 5,800 square metres.
What sort of a country would despise itself so much that they would turn that beauty, that World Heritage country, into an industrial landscape?
I urge all of you, to go and look at the back of Casino Airport. If you go at night, you can see large flares in the sky. It is not just methane that comes out of those flares. It's all sorts of crap.
Casino is a metaphor for Australia. Vocabulary is inadequate to describe what you see and hear if you go to these places.
So we're living in a world where there's a resource collapse. We've got the resource crisis now. That's why they're going for the coal seam gas, because they can't get natural gas anymore. The petrol's running out. All there's left is the things that are actually harder to get at. And instead of actually respecting the fact that there's more than one voice here about coal seam gas and industry and money, and that actually the fact that people need to live in this country as well, it's coming closer. It's coming closer to everybody's land. But I wonder whether people in the cities understand it doesn't end here. As the resources run out, they'll be going for even more difficult. They're getting even closer and closer into the cities. That won't stop. If they don't cherish people's communities here, they're not going to cherish people's communities close to the city. We'll have this mining industry right up in our faces, all up and down on this green strip. What sort of a country would do that? Not the country that I think that we all believe in.
There's renewed pressure on the state government tonight to protect Sydney's water supply from coal seam gas mining. Two major dams, Warragamba in the west and Warranora in the south, are earmarked for drilling within months.
Can you believe coal seam gas mining rights next to the Warragamba Dam in Sydney and the Somerset Dam in Brisbane, the source of Brisbane's water supply? In the next 10 to 12 years, approval has been given for 30 open-cut coal mines on the Darling Downs. 40,000 coal seam gas wells, 80% of Queensland, 90% of the Darling Downs. What the hell is going on? How can you allow 90% of the Darling Downs to be subject to some form of exploration licence or other?
This has nothing to do with good government, reason or fair play. This is about the traitorous corruption of our political and legal systems for the benefit of a greedy few.
Most all of these political parties are in bed with these people. I think the upper house in Queensland is virtually the mining industry.
A scandal is unfolding. The truth will come out. We're in the early stages of a great assault. Rural communities have been blitzed by an organised, powerful enemy that has no morality and no regard for their well-being. This is how the coal seam gas invasion works. For years, mining companies have been paying big money to an unbelievable number of Labor, Liberal and National ex-politicians and former public servants to influence governments as so-called lobbyists on their behalf.
This is a document that I'm not meant to have, in a way. You get it from Freedom of Information, you've got to fight like hell for it. And this is a list of lobbyists on behalf of the mining companies. Now, who do they get? Well, you just, for a start, AGL, alphabetically it's in front. So this one is a former Labor Deputy Premier, former advisor of the Queensland Premier Peter Beattie, policy advisor of the Queensland Minister for Natural Resources, former Queensland Liberal Attorney General. Not
content with their indexed parliamentary pensions, they have their snouts in the trough, eating up the wealth of rural Australia. Rampant greed has fed widespread corruption that has given us policies and laws that are not just bad, they are insane.
These people are paid, there's pages of them, paid by mining companies to gain access because they know the system is worked and away you go, with no consequence for the damage that's being done.
The recent local environmental plans are one example of corrupted policy that seeks to tightly control land use for everyone, except the so-called extractive industries.
Environmental impact statements are undertaken by consultants hired by and paid by the mining companies. Of course they're biased. In practice, the hired consultant becomes an advocate for the mining company. There is no peer review of these so-called environmental impact statements. Why isn't there a health impact statement? Why aren't there food security impact statements? Do we know, for example, what this is going to do in relation to dust and noise and congestion and water pollution? None of this is available. None. You don't know any of it. We're meant to take government and the mining industry on trust. Of course, the government says it will protect strategic cropping land from permanent alienation, but it doesn't define coal seam gas extraction as permanent alienation.
This is Australia, not Zimbabwe. The government's not going to put our lives at risk.
No one gives a shit about us, Dad. It's about money.
Can you guarantee that there is not going to be any negative impact?
No comment. The miners are licensed to do whatever they want, wherever they want. Established laws to protect landowners and the environment have been thrown out the window. Governments have always been able to resume land and pay fair compensation. But this is not what is happening here. The rights of landholders are being violated without proper consideration or compensation.
And of course, one of the reasons for this rush in mining development, and in particular coal seam gas development in New South Wales, is that the previous government in New South Wales granted a 5-year exemption from paying royalties on coal seam gas extraction. That means the taxpayer of New South Wales is getting absolutely nothing back. If any general in war deliberately did to their troops what the Premier and the Treasurer in Queensland have done to their people, they would be court-martialled. They have put at risk public health. They've put at risk public health by access to uncontaminated water, and they've put at risk the nation's ability to feed itself. Let me tell you today, farmers are at war and they feel they may as well declare it. And they're simply saying, Anna Bligh, Andrew Fraser, go. The mining industry of Queensland is the upper house of Queensland. Nothing happens without their approval. 80% of Queensland under mining licences, 90% of the Darling Downs. Go. This is not in Queensland or Australia's best interests.
Coal seam gas, or CSG, is a clean-burning energy source that is...
The destruction of a community begins quietly by stealth. Advertisers try to swindle the public into believing that the coal seam gas industry is clean and green, when, in reality, it's filthy and toxic.
The water may be re-injected into another aquifer or used by farmers for animals, crops or plantations.
Don't listen to the unnamed school teacher from Casino. This has nothing to do with bringing a new industry to town. What industry? Once the fly-in construction workers leave, we will be left with no tourism and an impoverished farming community.
Farmers have faced it all: drought, flood, fire, the oil shocks, commodity price crashes, escalating costs of production, but farmers have never faced anything like this.
This is my land. It's also one of Australia's biggest coal seam gas reserves.
The ads call it natural coal seam gas. They should read coal seam gas, natural, like cancer and death.
They look after the people and the land, and that's why they're always welcome here.
Santos are currently running ads designed to induce, in those who see them, a sense of feeling that this is all pretty mundane, straightforward, very safe. Well, they don't tell you what the ads should tell us. They're frightened to show us a map of the gas wells and what they look like. They're frightened to show us a map of the all-weather roads that will be needed to service the gas wells. They're frightened to show us a map of the topsoil, which will need to be removed for pipe construction to connect the gas wells. They're frightened to tell us where the employees will go, because they'll have recreational needs and they'll need to be administrative quarters. They're frightened to tell us that these coal seam gas initiatives will become large industrial estates. They don't tell us any of this. They will require many, many hectares. Santos don't tell us how many compressors they will need. They don't tell us what they'll do with the gas or the water. They say nothing about the reverse osmosis treatment plant, which you'll be able to hear for miles. They don't tell us, once the water is treated, where you'll store it, because the volumes will be greater than several Sydney harbours. They don't tell us where they'll put the residue. They don't tell us where the salt will go or what it will do to the soil. They don't tell us that it's a 24/7 operation. In other words, they don't tell us what a fully blown gas field looks like. And the reason they don't tell us is they think farmers will cop this nonsense. Well, I've got news for Santos and others: the farmers won't, because what coal seam gas and open cut coal mining are making into industrial zones now, in 30 years, they'll be industrial wastelands.
Well, it all started, I guess, with a company coming onto the property saying that They wanted to do an exploration well. They proved themselves to be liars from the start, and I think anyone that deals with this industry will very quickly realise that their first line of attack is a lie.
They employed sneaky people and people who could tell what lies one day and they'd tell you, sweet talk you one day and tell you a blatant lie in the face the following day.
I don't believe anyone will ever get the full truth out of this industry at all. If they tell you the full truth, they have to tell you they're going to poison the water, they're going to poison the air, and they're going to poison the soil. And that means we're all poisoned and we're all heading for a terrible future, an evil future.
With a strategy of divide and conquer, coal seam gas gets a toehold by conning individual landowners into signing secret, binding agreements to allow gas exploration on their properties. The negotiator tells you that he grew up on a farm and he wouldn't do anything to harm farming families. His promises and guarantees aren't worth the paper they are written on. You are signing an agreement with a shelf company which has no assets, and the coal seam gas drilling is done by another company not bound by these agreements. You will sign a confidentiality clause which makes it illegal for you to even discuss the agreement with your neighbours. It seems relatively harmless at first, but then the horror begins. You have signed away forever your right to control what happens on your property. Worse than that, you have seriously compromised everyone who lives near you. Their properties will be put into a buffer zone and used by the gas companies. The first your neighbours will know about it will be when the crews and equipment arrive. When someone allows coal seam gas mining onto their property, or a real estate agent sells a property to the miners, the value of all the land in the area plummets. In Queensland, families have had to just walk away from their farms because coal seam gas mining made their land worthless.
We see ourselves as coal seam gas refugees. We don't believe that we can subject our grandchildren to living in a gas field.
About 4.5 kilometres from us, they fracked the well, and all of a sudden, one day our grandkids were in the bath and they started crying, and so Kathy pulled them out of the bath and they had a ring around them. Everything that had been in the water was red, like a burn, like a chemical burn or a scald or something like that. We've since had a very sophisticated meter that shows quite high levels of hydrogen sulphide in the water. The point is, they can't do any of this safely.
The lady who lives within 200 metres of a gas well, her young son's the same age as my boy. He was bleeding from the nose as well as the ears. When my son first started developing these headaches, we thought he had a tumour. We've got 11 gas wells around us. What happens when there's thousands of gas wells here?
I have spoken to farmers who now know that they're going to regret these secret agreements all their lives. It starts with one well, but ends as a spider's web of pipes, wells and toxic ponds across your property.
People say it's only a 70 metre by 70 metre pad. A 70 metre pad is 1.5 times the length of an Olympic swimming pool. And that's square, and that could be within 200 metres of your house. And if you think about a network of 1,000 wells, we have an industrial landscape over what is essentially a World Heritage Area.
Farmers are saying they're political prisoners. If they refuse to sell their farm to the mines, they can't find buyers for the land. If you live next door to one of these outfits, your land is worth nothing. So they can't sell their land, their farms or their homes. Farmers know that government are selling out for money to mining companies that are owned by foreign governments such as the Communist Party of China. They're being sold out to multinational corporations who couldn't give a damn about the consequences for us. We're nothing more than a cheap quarry to them. And farmers are plaintively asking, why have governments turned their backs on farmers, the food producers in their own nation? Why are we forcing farmers off the land? Why are farmers being asked to hand over to foreign governments or to big multinational companies? Why can't farmers be allowed to stop these people entering their land? Why can't farmers protect their own soil? Why can't farmers protect their own water? Why aren't Australians up in arms about all of this?
For farming families, their land is their life's work. the value that a farming family adds to their property during their lifetime is often their only superannuation and legacy for their children. The decline in land values caused by coal seam gas mining is a massive, cruel transfer of superannuation wealth from farming families to mining companies.
I make no apologies for saying to these farmers, you are being invaded. This is legalised theft.
$1 is not going to be worth much when you can't buy good food. And I believe that property with gas wells or pipelines will be listed as toxic waste dumps, because that's what they are. These industries are notorious for spillage, and that's toxins, and those toxins are far worse than what they lock people's property up for now.
The big question in all of this is, do you love your country? Do you love the wild places of this country? Do you love the black soil plains of the Liverpool Plains or the Darling Downs? Or do you just see these areas as a source of a quick buck?
You might do a deal for $15,000 or $20,000 with a gas company, but your property is instantly devalued to probably half if you can sell it. We couldn't sell our property unless we sold it to a gas company. So your land will be worth nothing, you won't be able to produce anything, and 20,000's not much of a future.
Our future is our land and our water. Let gas go to poison that.
I heard about landholders in the Northern Rivers who have agreed to sue anyone who signs a coal seam gas agreement that affects the value of their properties. This makes sense to me.
Surely farmers would have the support of all Australia in their argument to protect underground water resources. Surely farmers would have the support of all Australia in their bid to go about producing food and fibre for an exploding global population. Surely farmers would have the support of all Australians who are serious about protecting our food supplies in the future and safeguarding valuable agricultural land.
As a rural area is industrialised, the psychological impact of such destruction of property, lifestyle and prospects results in predictable emotional responses. Many suffer anxiety, breakdown and depression. Some suicide.
And they just simply say, I'm going down the back to fix the fence. And they don't come back, they can't handle it. No one wants to be left as the last man holding out. Mining companies prey on that.
But some respond with anger, revenge and violence. Fear and anxiety are normal, healthy emotions. Anxiety alerts us to the presence of a threat, and fear and anger give us the drive to respond to danger. Our built-in survival mechanisms work well when we need to fight off a wild animal, but they are less effective when the danger is caused by distant politicians that you can't get your hands on. Many people have used their anxiety and anger well and have devoted enormous amounts of energy to fighting coal seam gas mining.
No coal seam gas!
If our efforts result in the danger being removed, then all will be well, and we will be able to let go of the anger because it's done its job. But if these efforts fail to remove the threat, then the anxiety and anger will persist.
We won't be able to live here because we've got to breathe in your gas! I've got 3 children! We've got 30 acres, what are we going to do? We're going to leave? Bastards!
We don't want a bloody gas field on top of where we bloody live, do we? Do you?
Anger turned inward leads to depression. Anger turned outward leads to violence.
Comment, mate. Violence isn't the answer, mate.
Every litre of water in Australia is more valuable than any 1 litre of gas, compressed gas liquid that they get out of the ground.
Earth's great systems of soil, water and air support all life on this planet. Take care of the soil, water and air and life will thrive. Damage the soil, water and air and life suffers.
All the world's ecosystems are under stress. We're not even maintaining our level of emissions. Not only are they not going down, they're actually increasing. There's no excuse for any further investment in fossil fuels. We need to be spending that money on shifting to renewables. If oil and fossil fuels in general become too expensive to extract, economies contract, there's no money and no energy to shift and build the new renewable energy infrastructure that we need to continue civilisation as we know it.
I want you to look me in the eye and say that I shouldn't have the same right to a clean, healthy Australia for the next 60 or 80 years. I want you to look at your children and your grandchildren and every young person you see walking down the street in town and tell them why you don't want them to have the same quality of life that you have when one day you're gone and they're still there living in the world.
The good news is we can shift to 100% renewable energy in Australia in 10 years. This has been demonstrated convincingly by a group called Beyond Zero Emissions based in Melbourne in conjunction with the University of Melbourne. All we lack is the political will. One of the favourite myths of the fossil fuel industry is that renewable energy can't do baseload power. That is complete rubbish and has been completely discredited by the Beyond Zero Emissions report. Denmark is going for 50% wind power, for example. That's a lot of baseload power provided by one renewable technology. Germany is going for 80% renewable energy by 2020. If they can do it with their minimal sun and wind, what's our excuse when we have world-class wind and sun resources? And with a combination of concentrating solar thermal, using all the sun out in the deserts, and wind with our abundant coastline and oceans, we can do it.
We no longer rely on the horse as our major means of transport. We do change, and we have to change.
The cavalry ain't going to ride up, that we are the cavalry. All of us are. If you study history, no change has come because the government said it's a good idea. None of them have. It's come from the people.
Coal seam gas mining pollutes ground and surface water. It contaminates pastures. It fouls the air. It harms people, animals and plants. Proponents of the coal seam gas industry are so obsessed with their own self-interest that all they can see is the gas down below. For them, soil, water, air and the life they support are just obstacles in the way of their getting to the gas. But for most of us, life is not just about making money. Life is also about creating happiness and well-being. The money the miners and government make is not worth the price that our community will pay. The political supporters of coal seam gas have ignored risk assessment and due diligence as they have revved up this industry. Have they analysed the risks involved in building thousands of gas wells connected by miles of pressurised pipes across bushfire-prone rural Australia?
So you have leakage of methane on the surface, you have a potential fire hazard. I mean, someone could be out slashing their paddock, hit a stone, and it could ignite the methane. I mean, sure, the odds might be pretty low, but it is actually possible for that to happen.
I hope that the RFS forbids their crews from going anywhere near a fire that threatens a coal seam gas well.
We heard this pop, and then our son called. He said that the well was on fire. And then the fire trucks came, but they waited way down because there was nothing they could do.
How easy is it to put out a burning coal seam gas well or a gas pipeline ruptured in multiple places? Can those responsible guarantee the security of the gas network and the safety of rural citizens? I have heard that coal seam gas companies prefer access rights rather than ownership, because this leaves the landholder with the legal liability for fires and other damage. As a landowner, I did not like the sound of that at all.
I've been locked out of my own bit of land. Someone's denied access, so in this case it's us denied access.
So you bought a master key?
The master key is a set of bolt cutters.
On the Lloyds property, 2 out of 3 QGC wells are leaking. They told the company back in 2006, but it wasn't properly fixed.
So what we've got here is a well. It's leaking so much gas, it's bubbling.
I think we've got to make sure that the politicians and other decision makers get the message that we're not happy and we know why we're not happy. We're not just here causing trouble, we're not professional protesters.
The strength of the coal seam gas industry is its massive wealth and political power. Its weakness is that it's on the wrong side. It pursues greed at a terrible cost to Australia. Opponents of the coal seam gas industry do not have great wealth, but we are on the right side of this issue. We accept our responsibility as custodians of the land. We want to pass on the right legacy to future generations. We know that clean water, good soil, and healthy rural communities are going to be the most precious commodities in the world, bar none, in coming decades. What will it take to stop the relentless coal seam gas industrialisation of the Australian countryside? History gives us some examples of protests that change government policy, but the current situation is unlike anything that has gone before. In the 1960s, I witnessed the marches against the Vietnam War. I remember the 1970s Terania Creek and the 1980s Franklin River protests. In Kyogle, we will see a similar hard-fought campaign. The planned pipeline from Kyogle across the border ranges to Queensland, where the gas will be shipped to Communist China, would open all of the northern rivers to coal seam gas mining. Kyogle is where the tide has to turn. The pipeline must be stopped. All people of the northern rivers must band together and support each other. This campaign will not be easy. There were 2 squads of riot police and paddy wagons stationed outside the Gunnedah Town Hall during the forum. Is this a taste of things to come? How far will these governments go to protect the interests of their corrupt mining mates? Wherever this takes us, I strongly urge everyone not to direct their anger and protests at mining employees. Protests should be directed at the politicians and executives who are personally responsible for the coal seam gas outrage. We must take the fight to those who make the decisions. But we'd better hurry up if we want to protest to the executives involved. I read the other day that McGasco is selling out to a company partly owned by Communist China. It won't be easy to protest to executives who live in Beijing. What a great idea. Start up a coal seam gas company. Make a fortune selling out to China, who benefits from a 5-year exemption on royalties, and then charge Australian consumers world parity price for the gas they purchase for domestic power production. How good is that? A woman from Tara, Queensland, told me that she had visited a farmer friend to find him curled up on the floor crying. He was being driven mad because he could not escape the noise of a nearby gas compression station. He could not sell his land. He could not afford to move away. We cannot allow such things to happen in Kyogle.
The biggest issue I see is the division this is creating or could create in our community. Setting farmer against farmer, when one has accepted an offer and one is violently opposed.
Grown men and women in tears because mining companies have torn apart their communities, destroyed friendships, torn apart a tough and proud and self-reliant people for good. They're finished. They're finished.
It's causing division in the town through some of the companies. There's been a punch-up in one of the pubs in town. That was over one of the construction companies undercutting another company, and that was related to their work with the mining company.
The splits in our community have the potential to wreck us.
Landowners in Bulahdelah and some communities in Victoria were able to turn the coal seam gas monster away because they all agreed to lock the gate.
The Northern Rivers need to lock the gate, stand in front of these people and stop it. No more wells. You need to make a commitment to each other, your community and your children, that no more wells will be drilled in the Northern Rivers.
Don't entertain any of the industry propaganda or any of the people that come to your door. Lock the gate first. Help your neighbour lock his gate, help your community lock their gate, and don't let these people destroy this beautiful area.
Coal seam's got to go, and Frackers got to go, as well.
lies have stood out over the years. If it beats the Northern Rivers, Australia is finished. There will be nowhere.
Coal seam gas mining is already in communities around the country, and we have no time to lose.
We want to help people fight because we've seen what happens if you don't fight or if you fight too late. Our fight started 6 years too late, and pretty much by stealth and lies and bullying, especially bullying, these companies have worked their way through the entire community, really.
If each of us sees ourselves as a leader in just one little action, think of one little thing you can do as an individual, something you can lead. We're all leaders in this.
Northern Rivers is not for sale. You're not getting gas from us either, Arrow. Lock the gate to coal seam gas.
Australia can be saved if everyone agrees to lock the gate to coal seam gas mining. We all need to talk to our neighbours. We all need to talk to real estate agents to make sure they understand that coal seam gas mining will destroy our way of life, our land and our community.
There are disparate influences at work here that we have never seen in this country. It doesn't matter which part of this political spectrum you sit on. It doesn't matter if you're an environmentalist or a farmer, whether you were yesterday or what you might be tomorrow. All walks of life in rural communities are ready to mobilise, and they've been working together for months. And they form friendships based on a mutual respect for the land. And those friendships will stand the test of time. And they're fighting government that has no respect for our people, our public health, our water security or our food security. They're fighting against companies that are multinational. And they're fighting because they've been sold out by government and by politicians. Well, the fight back has begun.
What an unbelievable show of community strength this is for the Northern Rivers area.
This is something the community not just does not want, but will not have.
When our leaders fail us, as the Queensland government has, and the federal government has, and probably every state government has, then ordinary people have got to become heroes.
This isn't a narrow group of people here today. We've got the Aboriginal community, we've got farming communities, we've got the whole cross-section who recognise that this industry is going to do enormous damage to us, our water, our food and the future.
This is communities against methane madness. Yes! Against coal craziness. Yes! We'll fight to the bloody end.
Yes! We have to be ready to act. Non-violent civil disobedience at these sites. Now, I don't know about you, but there are plenty of farmers and landholders my way who have told me that they have no problems with taking up action against any mining companies that want to push their way onto their land. We will have thousands of people there ready to stand in their way. Barry O'Farrell has a choice now. He has a choice. He has a choice between you and Matt Gasco, you and the mining companies. That's the choice. He has a choice between destroying water systems and maintaining the agricultural potential of the Northern Rivers and the rest of New South Wales. More importantly, and this is the real choice, we do not need coal seam gas. It is a choice between gas and renewable energy in this state.
The frackers will tell us that they provide jobs. They don't. Renewable energy is where all the jobs will come from.
It'll come a time in the future when the kids will stand up and say, when you knew it was wrong, what did you do? Are you going to stand up and be counted? Or are you going to be one of those people who sit on the fence? Stand up, lock the gate, we've had enough.
And this is likely to be the biggest environmental issue this country has ever seen, and this will be the biggest social movement this country has ever seen. This is going to be the biggest campaign in Australia's history, and we're going to win.
We as the 99% majority are the answer. We are the solution. And our actions will determine the quality of life for generations who follow.
Here is our platform that we can stand upon and build our future. Lock the gate, stand together and let's make CSG history. Strengthen community.
Australia is God's own country. Let's keep it that way. None of us wants this fight, but we will not back down.
Lock the gate to coal seam gas, people!
that good for you?
For the sake of our families, our country and our future, we will force coal seam gas mining out of rural Australia.
Love the game.